as the synthesizer in my brain is always stuck on steel drums. Welcome to No Clip. I'm Chad Ruthermond.
And I'm Andy Kinnick.
And today, we're going to be talking about Kentucky Route Zero, which was a game that was developed by Cardboard Computer, published by Annapurna Interactive, and was released in it was released in 2020. Sort of.
The full release.
Yes. The final episode came out in January of this year. And this is probably talked about a lot in regards to this game, but I feel like it's a place to start. This game was kickstarted in 2011, I want to say, and the first episode came out in 2013. And we played that first episode. Mm-hmm. Like, way a million billion years ago.
Yeah, like 5 years ago or something. It's been a while.
Yeah. And so the game has been releasing, and we have just been not playing it.
Yeah, we were waiting for the whole thing.
Right. Little did we know. Like, it would be... periodically, we would be, like, sitting around doing nothing. And one of us would be like, is Kentucky Route Zero done yet? We would have to Google it and be like, nope. I guess we'll wait another year.
And then I would like confuse it with other games in your Steam library. I'm like, was it Oxenfree or Kentucky Route Zero? Like, which one was the one
with
the dog?
Yeah, and the guy, the truck.
Yeah.
So yeah. It's had sort of a tumultuous release cycle, which is, I want to say, it's weird for sure. Like, it's not a thing that normally happens. It almost kind of feels like the different episodes of this game are like individual sequels, but just ones that only take 45 minutes to an hour and a half to finish.
They try to do something different with each one.
Yeah. And in addition to that, this game is... Well, first of all, this game is hard to describe and talk about, but we've got an hour and a half, so let's try and make it count. But the game is far more of like an art project than it is a traditional adventure game.
Mm-hmm. There aren't really puzzles.
Right. Or impediments in any way. Really.
Yeah, it's very narrative focused.
Mm-hmm. And... I actually think that this, like, incredibly long-form release schedule kind of helps with that, because it allows it to take on a different tone entirely. Like, if artistic expression is an emotional thing, which I imagine most people would argue it is, the amount that your life can change from year to year really... changes how you want to express things. And you can see how the game sort of changes its tone to being more like it has this overarching tone and this like genre of magical realism, which is complicated in itself and a little strange, but you can tell like it has these peaks and valleys as you go through it, and there's some parts of this game are really funny, other parts are real sad, other parts reflect certain elements of like the economy and the state of the world at the time. Like it's really crazy to go through it all at once, because it does feel like this sort of multifaceted thing.
Yeah, the long development period does feel like you can feel the priorities of the narrative shift over time. Like, I'd be shocked if the original idea for the ending is the same as the ending is now when they started. Because it feels like the focus and the things that are important early are so far like away from what's important by the end.
Yeah. And, I mean, this is obviously personal preference, like, eyes of the beholder, etc., etc. But, like, for me, I feel like before you know if you're going to like playing this game, you have to get at least most of the way through Act 2 before you like really get a grasp on if like this is speaking to you or not.
Mm-hmm.
I think the first act of this game is, while intriguing, it feels like it's setting up for something that the game isn't.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And having played the first act so long ago, it ended up to like be making this a really weird experience, because like I love the first episode. It's probably my favorite one, or act, whatever you want to call it. And because like it really sets up the zero as like this interesting mystery. Like the premise is cool. It's very like Twilight Zone or like Twin Peaksy, or as you said, magical realism, etc. You're this old man making a delivery, and the address he has like doesn't exist seemingly, and it starts at this gas station with like a mysterious attendant, and he points you towards this underground highway known as Route Zero that may or may not exist itself, and it's really built up, and the whole first act is you trying to find it.
Yeah.
And the pacing's great and the build-up is great. And like exploring the map is interesting. Like there's cool visuals. It just has like a really strong like central concept, I think. And then once you hit Act 2, it's kind of similar. They start to push out into different things, and then by Acts 3 and 4 they just go completely different, and it becomes less cohesive as it goes. And I liked the little like the setups in the first act that don't really get followed up on.
Yeah. And that lack of cohesion is like, I feel like there's two elements to it, because I do agree with what you're saying. I don't agree that Act 1 is my favorite. If anything, it's probably my least favorite, but that's like obviously a very different sort of like, that's not really a marker of quality. So I still like the first episode or the first act, but it is like because it is so different and it doesn't get into the stuff that's in this game that I really enjoy. It's not there for me. But the lack of cohesion feels partly because of this extended development cycle, and obviously partly because of the constant like switching up of things with the little interstitial episodes.
I think that enhances the game.
I agree.
The differences in kind in the interstitials is really well done, I think.
But I also think that part of the lack of cohesion is intentional, as you see the game shift toward this like ensemble cast as you start picking up like basically every person you run into on the way. So yeah, I honestly don't know where to begin with this.
Yeah, there's a lot of good places. I guess speaking more broadly like we are now, this is a point and click. But having played it on Switch, like on a console, it didn't really feel like it while I was playing it. And I think that's interesting, like how many like point and click adventure inspired games, like something like the Cat Lady as well, like you can control that with arrow keys.
Yeah.
And like that kind of like, it's almost like a de-evolution or a deconstruction of the genre that you see a lot of nowadays, to the point where like while you're playing it, even though it's basically the same thing, it feels totally different.
Yeah. This game feels like it's abstracted away from the point and click in like the design. Like parts of it, most of what you do with the mouse when you're playing this game are clicking on dialogue choices. And you have the movement mechanics of clicking around with the mouse to direct your character to go from place to place. But aside from that, like what defines the adventure game genre as we knew it in the LucasArts days is like this puzzle design and elements of pixel hunting, things like inventory management, and none of that at all is present. And similarly to the Cat Lady, it makes it feel like when you're playing through the game, you are feeling less and less like you did when you played Grim Fandango. Like it's not the same feeling at all, to the point where you start to forget it's like playing an action RPG and being like, well, it is just a role-playing game that you move around and press buttons in.
Yeah.
But, like, you forget, like, the turn-based origins of the genre completely when you're playing them.
Yeah.
It feels like that even though they're solidly within the same thing. And playing with a controller just abstracts it even more.
And so another one of, like, the key mechanical things in this game is you're making decisions, like dialogue decisions, constantly.
Yeah.
And I felt like early on they felt like they would be significant things. Maybe not all of them, but like enough of them. And as the game goes on, it seems pretty clear that they aren't significant in the slightest.
Yeah. I mean, it depends on your definition of significance.
Like, they don't
that
change.
Might be splitting hairs.
They don't change the story at all.
Right.
Like, in the beginning, it feels like there are decisions that you could make that would change what would happen. And as it goes on, it becomes more and more obvious that that's not true.
Yeah. I think because what it is it doesn't change the story, but it changes what parts of the story you hear.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can basically choose what elements you want to focus on. And Act 4 makes this really explicit, but in other places it's really subtle. And I do like that. I feel like it should have been more transparent, because when I play a game with dialogue choices, I want to role play as like the character that I'm playing as, make the choices that seem like they make the most sense. But the way to enjoy the way that I enjoyed this game was to not think about it, to just sort of go with what feels right in the moment. Like what's the most interesting, or what like just rolled off the tongue the nicest. Like, and that just sort of like makes the story unfold really naturally. It doesn't feel like you have an objective really ever, and I think that benefits it.
Yeah, it remains engaging throughout, even though it's pretty like flaccid in reality. Like, you know, like it doesn't really actually do much, but like it is enjoyable in a way. It's hard to describe, almost like it's like tailoring it kind of to your tastes a little bit.
Yeah, like you're answering their personality questions.
Yeah.
Would you prefer this or that? And actually, one of the interstitials, probably my favorite one, which was here and there along the echo, is literally just a phone. Prior to the release of, I believe, the like complete edition of the game, the only way to like access this interstitial was to literally call the phone number that's on the back of the pamphlet. Also, I guess they sold like a promotional phone. Like it was just like a phone that you could buy one time that only dialed that number.
Wow.
So that's odd, but
yeah.
It just feels like it's like the description of the game as just picking the things you feel are relevant to you is essentially comparing the game to a touch-tone phone interface, and so they literally put one in the game.
Yeah. I think they made all the interstitials free on their website or whatever to play, even if you don't want to buy the game. I don't know if you can still do that.
It would be super confusing also, I feel like. Not that this game isn't.
Yeah, but yeah, the phone and like the one that's designed to be in VR, like the
entertainment.
Yeah, the entertainment they're all pretty cool. Those are the two standouts, I think. And the TV station is cool too. Like they add, like in a like world building sense, I guess. Like they just kind of flesh out the world and let you see things from yet even more perspectives than you already get.
Yeah. Well, the entertainment was I feel like the entertainment is like the groundbreaking part of this game, and I will expound on that in a little bit because that's where like my perception of it really shifted. But it and Pueblo de Nada, the people of nowhere.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. That, the TV station interstitial, are not just unlike all of the other ones, are like critical information for you to understand what comes up in the next act.
Mm-hmm.
And it is like, I didn't know that was going to be the case, and the entertainment in particular really fucking like knocked my socks off, because I really liked the setup of it. I liked the execution, and when you show up at the bar afterward,
Mm-hmm.
I was like, you're kidding me. Because like the thing that what it leads you to believe in the entertainment through the use of these like external text prompts that come up, because the whole game is told through text. We haven't mentioned that yet. This is another game that if you haven't played it, like, this podcast probably isn't going to do a whole lot for you, but when you like look around in the entertainment, you can look behind you into like what would be essentially backstage, and you're led to believe that this is like a student production that is this guy something Doolittle, his two of his plays mashed together, and you are playing the part of the barfly, and then everyone else is performing the entertainment. But you are actually watching something that is real.
Yeah.
And when you show up and like the entertainment, the band they say is coming, meets up with you and becomes part of your regular traveling party, and the fact that Harry, the barkeeper, is just like a regular dude and is there, and all of this presumably happened on the same night. It's just fucking wild. Like,
yeah. I saw all that coming a little bit more clearly, I guess. Like, I the whole part with like the plays, I kind of thought of as like a framing device, or I don't know. But as soon as I met Junebug and Johnny, I assumed we were going to the bar where that interstitial took place.
Well, yeah, I mean, when you get introduced to Junebug...
I mean, I thought that's pretty early in that episode.
Yeah, it's like immediately.
Yeah.
But the fact that it happens at all is what surprised me. I didn't expect any of that to actually occur. Because if you look at the interstitial between episodes 1 and 2...
With the museum.
Yeah, it's just these art exhibits, and
Don't you go to that museum? Isn't that where you meet Ezra? Isn't that the same building?
No, because that's the Museum of... Welcome to Kentucky Route Zero, everybody. That's the Museum of Housing. That is the other one is an installation of all of Lula Chamberlain's.
Okay, I thought those were the same place.
No, they're two different locations. And also the people who are there
are the people from the TV station.
Right.
Emily and Bob. I don't remember the other ones.
I think it's Ben, Bob, and
Emily. That sounds right.
Yeah. Who I believe are also the people who are playing D&D in the first chapter.
I don't remember that.
Okay.
But I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah. So those are the people in that museum. I don't know where that museum is. I'm presuming it's on the Zero.
Probably.
Because I think the TV station is... I mean, it's off the Echo River. The geography is intentionally confusing.
Yeah.
But, yeah, like, so I didn't know what was, like, a real thing that was happening, what was interpretation, and what was just supposed to be flavor.
Yeah.
And when they come, like, colliding together, which is kind of the point, I guess, it really, like, shook me.
Yeah, that is where they merge like, it did feel like they were separate, and that is where they merge. You were correct.
Let's just start with Act 1, I guess?
Sure. Do you want to talk more about like the scenes, or kind of like, because one thing I find really interesting are all the different forms of maps and how like the game world is presented to you. I like the road map a lot. You move the little wheel around it, and it almost kind of gave me like I don't know if it's the best comparison, but kind of like West of Loathing, or like something where like you move a piece around a map and you get a little descriptor of like what's there, and then you check it out, and there may or may not be a scene, or it might just be text.
That might not be the best description, but it's weirdly also the one that I thought of, so it might be actually the best description. But yeah, no, I did like that. I loved that when you were on predominantly just Route 65, it was like a tire for your truck, but then inexplicably it becomes like a unicycle when you're on the Zero. Like, it has pedals on it.
Yeah.
I don't really understand what that's supposed to mean, but I like that they have like a differentiator because it makes it look like goofier in a way that is unreal and strange. But yeah, I also like I like the aesthetic of the Zero because I'm a dork. But in addition to that, I like the method of navigation as well. Like the fact that you have real world navigation. The way that they tell you to get places, go to the prosthetic factory and make a right. And then on the Zero, it's like just that, but corrupted a little bit. It's like, go until you reach the crystal, then turn around. And that's just how everything's navigated. Like, the landmarks don't show up until you've, like, put in a combination.
Right.
I thought that was really interesting and well done. I don't know if that is supposed to symbolize anything.
Yeah, given that the game is called Kentucky Route Zero, you spend surprisingly little time on Route Zero.
Yeah.
And I kind of felt like they added a few too many forms of, like, transportation. Because, like, you had the whole thing with Julian, like, flying on the bird.
Yep.
You got the Zero, you've got Route 65, and you've got the Echo River.
Yep.
I feel like they could have all just kind of been consolidated, is that the right word?
Yeah.
Into one thing called Route Zero, and that could have been fleshed out more.
Yeah, I think so. I expressed some lament when I finished this game and realized I wasn't going to have time to go back and hit the spots on the Bureau of Secret Tourism pamphlet, because there is more stuff on the Zero, but that stuff is akin to the stuff that you can just find driving around in town, which I don't know if you did a whole lot of.
A little bit.
Yeah, they're all just like, and this is like the story of this game, but they're all these just evocative descriptions of things that play out like Zork, like a text-based game. And you don't have, it's not like new content in the way that each scene is. It's just new text to make you think about stuff. And everything on the Zero is essentially the same thing, from my understanding.
Yeah, and it's like all optional. You know, and if the game had presented like a point in the story where it would like incentivize you to stop and explore the Zero, like I think that also would have been fine. Like, it just never really does. It's like you're on it, you go to a place, and then like you move on. Yeah. You know, like, it's so downplayed, like, once you finally get to it, that I just, that seems like an oversight to me, or like I don't know, given how like the first act builds up to it, and then it's just kind of like a better name for the game would have been like Kentucky Echo River, because you spend a whole lot more time on it, and a whole lot of significant stuff happens there.
Yeah, and I mean, on top of that, it's like it feels like it's a change in direction. Like they wanted to go somewhere else with the plot of the game, but they couldn't change the name of the game from Kentucky Route Zero after doing 2 episodes.
Right.
So they ended up just kind of like rolling with it. Like the Zero is indicative of like traveling on the other side. Like, and it seems to mean different things for different people as to like why they would want to go to the Zero.
The Twilight Zone.
The Twilight Zone. But it is always like, that's like the thing. Like, presumably people don't go to the Echo River because it's all underground, just like casually.
Right.
It's always, it's in the same sort of vein. So it
like
serves like
drifters.
the same purpose. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It is weird, and I wish that you would have gone back at least once. Because the one time that you really have free reign to be on the Zero, your character has a horrible limp.
Yeah.
And it makes traveling slower, and they are constantly talking about how it looks like you're about to die.
Yeah. And, like, you have, like, it's a very linear, like, story-driven game, and like you have the delivery there the whole time, making you feel like, well, I can't take too long to deliver this package, you know, like how long has it been? Like days,
Right.
and I've made no progress. You know, so you have that narrative reason to keep moving, and also like navigating the zero is confusing, and you feel like you might get lost, so you don't want to like fuck around. You just kind of want to go follow the directions you have.
Yeah.
So yeah, it doesn't quite click into place the way you would want it to.
Yeah, I don't know how to there's a slight implication, I think, in the game that time isn't
passing.
Yeah, like
yeah,
anything.
I think the whole thing takes place in like 2 or 3 days.
Well, I think the plot of the game takes place over the course of one night.
One night?
Yeah. Like, I think when there's like an element of just sort of what is happening isn't really like causing time to, like, I think that time is either ignored by the game completely or time underground doesn't change.
See, in my mind, like everything up to like the Echo River had been like one night.
Mm-hmm.
Then all the time spent on the river was like its own day, and then showing up at the town at the end was a third day. That's kind of how it felt to me.
I could potentially see that.
But I think you might be right. Like, it does kind of feel like it doesn't acknowledge time at all.
Right.
And it could all just be on one day.
Yeah. Well, because the reason that I say this, and actually the reason why you might be right as well, is it bookends, like, the first scene at Equus Oils is the sun setting,
Mm-hmm.
And you talk about it like it's called attention to, and then Act 5 is the sunrise on the day after when you make your delivery, and you're in Dogwood Drive where the station is and everything. But then in the middle, you're mostly underground, so it could like a day could easily pass without you knowing.
Mm-hmm.
But in Act 3, maybe early in Act 4,
Mm-hmm.
there's the situation where Conway gets indebted to the power company and has to start work in the morning.
Right.
So that would have to take place like during the day before the sunrise,
right,
or the nighttime before the sunrise. I don't know when that is.
Yeah, it's definitely, time is convoluted in Kentucky.
Time is convoluted in Kentucky. That's what I always say when I'm in Kentucky.
But do we want to dial it back? Because I do want to talk about the first act, more like kind of how it's designed and everything. Because it starts out with you showing up at the gas station with the big horse head, you know.
Yeah, it cuts a good silhouette.
It sure does. And right away you're playing as Conway, the old man, and like first thing you get to do is like name the dog, etc. And then like you go in to the gas station to you have to like flip the breaker or something because the power goes out.
Yeah.
So you go down there and there's like people playing D&D, and there's like the one thing that you could call a puzzle in the game where you have to turn the light off to find the glow in the dark D20. You go back to the table and they're not there. It's just like this really nice setup to like the supernatural elements. Like the old man isn't really, like at the gas station, isn't quite what he seems, and then you experience weird things in the basement. And then he sends you to this woman's house, like Weaver, I don't remember.
Weaver Marquez.
Yeah, there you go. And she's got like a broken TV, and she's going to tell you how to get to the zero, if you can get it fixed for her, etc., etc. It kind of like sends you off on your little quest, and you meet Shannon and all that.
I want to just like stop and point out one thing. We talked at the very beginning of this episode about how the game has this relationship with the choices it makes.
Mm-hmm.
Depending on how you answer her, because this is one of the few parts of the game that I've done twice.
Mm-hmm.
You can, like, if you tell her, like, sure, I'll get your TV fixed, and she, like, holds the information about the zero hostage, she'll send you to the bait shop where Shannon is.
Uh-huh.
But if you ignore her, which is what I did, and be like, I really just need to get to the zero, if you could please help me, she gives you the same instructions to go to the bait shop. Like, there's no difference in, like, what your next thing is. It's just, like, this slightly different flavor. And I that's one of the things that I like about that approach, I guess.
That is funny. But yeah, and then she sends you out to find Shannon, and you end up finding her at the coal mine. But I like a lot of the focus on, like, the mystery of the zero and having to explore the map. Mm-hmm. There's, like, an emphasis put on that. And that mix of, like, the way the narrative's delivered and, like, the exploration of the map and how, like, you never know which spot's gonna give you a little scene, etc. Like, there's, like, the car wreck that has a scene, but, like, there's nothing there, at least that I found.
Yeah.
I just think it's all laid out and designed in a way that I like.
It makes you want to go off course in a way that, like, is kind of the fact, like, I think it's the simplistic design and the fact that things will just sort of, like, spring into existence. It means that you can't look at things and go, I'm not interested in doing that. You'll see it, and because you see it, you'll want to do it. So you end up doing the thing, and then you go, look at all these other roads. Like, am I going to go down these? Can I go down them right now?
There are a lot of roads.
Yeah, and you can just drive around. Like, there's a scene that I found where it's just two guys pushing an airplane.
Yeah.
And I waited until they pushed it all the way off the screen to see if something would happen. No. They leave. Nothing. Like, it's just these two Sisyphus plane pushers doing their thing, and then it just ends.
Yeah,
move on.
I just feel like the rest of the game never really has that sort of feel to it.
Yeah. At the very least, it isn't environmental exploration.
Mm-hmm.
There's not really many other kinds of exploration to be done. Everything is more compact. The vistas are bigger and more, like, visually impressive, but there feels like there's less to do in them. I'll put a fucking bookmark down for Act 5 because that's like it feels very different from the rest of it. But yeah. It also feels like Act 1 sets up for a game that could exist that is like a totally different game where you actually solve puzzles and like go from place to place to do things for people in order to achieve goals. But that really isn't the game that we got. There aren't really any other puzzles. There's one other place where you have to do something at a prescribed time in order to proceed. But that thing is also just turning a light off, which is incredibly confusing. There's two other times where you turn lights off to proceed.
Yeah.
Once in the minecart, which is also in Act 1. Or is that in Act 2?
Yeah, that's in Act 1.
Act 1. And then in the Bat Sanctuary. But that's all. That's all there is. It's really strange. Do we want to go to Act 2 from here to try and describe how it, like, changes?
Sure, yeah, that makes sense.
Because at the end of Act 1, you do pick up...
The end of Act 1 is probably my favorite scene in the game.
Okay.
Where you focus in on the TV and the barn disappears and it becomes the entrance to the zero.
Yeah.
Like, I remember when we played this the first time, I was like, oh, fuck. Like, that's so cool. Like,
I gotta remember to ask if this game is finished for the next 8 years.
That was such, like, I was already hooked, but that was, like, the line and sinker.
Interestingly, so I was not as excited about the rest of this game after playing Act 1 as you were.
Well, you stopped paying attention.
Like, yeah, because I didn't want to spoil it. Yeah, I did go back and play through Act 1
okay, I
later.
didn't know that.
Yeah. The thing that actually hooked me this time around, where I was like, never mind, I actually love this, was 1 second after that in the art museum. Like, I thought that whole sequence was fantastic. But yeah, so that actually is what happens after Act 2. Though I do agree with you on that sequence, because you get the part of it before when you're talking to Weaver. The only time that you actually speak to her in the game. And you look at the TV and then you zone out again and the barn is there and the horses aren't in the barn. And that's like he makes a note of this.
Right.
And so, like, the fact that the barn is there, like, you know that there's something strange about it. And then when you come back and get that second reveal, it's just super good. But yeah, so the first interstitial that came out between the first two acts is just I think it's 4 pieces of, like, artwork that you go around to and just sort of like go through a series of dialogues.
3 people talking about it.
And the big focus on this one is the tape, where you sort of like can read. You come back to the story later. It's set up for what actually happened with Lula Chamberlain, which is she, I guess, was an artist and then started doing work with a guy whose name I don't remember.
I feel like I should remember it.
Walter?
I don't think that's right, but we can call him that.
Well, it's an old man, an old crazy man when you meet him.
The Lord of the Mountain.
Yeah, the Lord of the Hall of the Mountain King.
Yeah, the Mountain King, that's it.
Yeah. He, but it's like her, him, and then a third guy, John. And like they go on this whole, like, they're doing research and they go into this cave and it sort of sets up for like what the whole, like, why that dude is stuck on the zero, why everything is down there. But what you get in this interstitial is just like it's magnetic tape nailed to a wall, and you follow it with a playback head, or rather a character does, and you just tell him what directions to go. And it's structured like once again, like a text-based game, like Zork. And I only want to talk about this. I mean, I love the visuals of the whole thing. I love that if you start going left and walk all the way around, you get to the exit, but if you keep going, it reveals that the exit was just like a perspective switch from the plaque that begins the whole thing. Which blew my mind, but I'm some fucking plebeian who doesn't understand art, and just the simplest visual illusion makes me crap my pants. But the thing that I love about the tape section is that there's a point where you reach an ending, and they go, there's some tape we haven't played. Let's just jump up there and do it. Because, like, it's what you would want to do.
Yeah.
In real life, and a game never would give you that opportunity. And it's just such a brilliant move that they were like, one of them was just like, it's not fucking cheating. Like, we're in an art exhibit. Like, just do it.
It does give you that feeling of, like, breaking the rules, too.
But yeah, I did love that. And then Act 2 happens.
Right. All right. So Act 2 opens up at the Bureau of Reclaimed Spaces, as it's called, which I think starts off right off the bat with a cool visual where, like, the road has just ended in the building. Like, you just have the truck parked in the lobby. And they make a comment about how, like, the road just ended. It's an interesting thing, and the building is also, like, half office building, half church.
Yeah, it used to be a cathedral, and then they put the building in there and moved the people into a storage locker.
Yeah, and then you go over and you talk with the secretary and everything, and you're kind of sent on a little goose chase to all the different floors, and one of them is just filled with bears. Yeah, it's a really strong start. I really liked the beginning of Act 2.
I don't know if Google, like the company Google and the algorithms that they employ in order to deliver personalized information to everyone through digital means, knows me really well, or if this is just a very common question, but if you begin to type Kentucky Route Zero into Google, one of the top results for me was Kentucky Route Zero space bears. And I don't know if I would have Googled that, but seeing it made me Google it. There's no information. It's just there are bears there. It's super weird.
Did you go to that floor?
Oh, yeah.
What happens?
The bears just look at you. Like, you can walk around and they will follow you by, like, looking as you walk by, but they seem to be doing business just as bears do.
Yeah. I didn't go to it. I don't really remember why, because I thought about it, but then ended up not. I think that's the way I was with this whole game. Like, there were optional things. I was like, I want to do that. But then I just kept going along with the story and then, like, forgetting about the extra stuff.
The extra stuff, a lot of it feels like interpretive. Like, it's things that you could go to and then it sort of, like, will deepen the tone that whatever scenario you're in is going for. But it doesn't always... Like, I don't think any of it is... Obviously, it's not critical, because it wouldn't be called optional if it was. But, like, I don't think any of it is so...
additive?
Yeah, that it really is necessary. Like, I don't think that you had a worse experience for not looking at the bears.
I mean, you get to see them when you ride the elevator past, so, you know.
It was like the third time on the elevator before I noticed it, and I was like, I did like that thing where everything was weird, and so as the elevator went by, it all just kind of like became nothing to me. And then
I mean, I can't relate to that at all. I say but
and then I noticed the bears and was like, I like squinted a little bit.
It says bears
on the elevator
list.
Button.
Yeah. The bears immediately jumped out at me.
Well, the elevator button did. I was like, haha, bears. But I didn't think to look at the individual floors. So that was an amusing twist when I did catch it. Which is obviously why I went to the floor and didn't just skip by it.
Yeah, I guess the delayed reaction would make it more tempting to go there.
Yeah.
Then I kind of forget what happens next. You go back on the zero...
Well, because what it actually
because your leg is
with,
you try to look for the doctor,
right? Well, you go on the zero to go in the infinite convolution that is this plot, the plot of this game. What you actually like the beat by beat structure of Act 2 is you get on the zero, you end up at the bureau because everyone ends up at the bureau because it's like the only place that you can just find, I guess. They tell you to go... You ask where Dogwood Drive is. They ask you to go talk to somebody. There's a bunch of bureaucratic runaround. It's actually also like West of Loathing in that sequence where you had to keep going back and forth from the ghost town to the other place.
Right.
And eventually they say that you have to go get their old files, which are in the storage locker where they moved the congregation of the church that they reclaimed.
Right.
So you go there, you get the files, then you go back, then you get the instructions to get to Dogwood, and then you go to the doctor.
Right.
Who's in the real world on Route 65.
Right, and you had to take a bird there.
Right. Well, once again, you get instructions to go to the doctor's place. It's been replaced by the Museum of Dwellings. When you're in the Museum of Dwellings, then you get flown to the forest because that's where the doctor actually is.
So we should...
But none of it matters.
Put a pin in that one there. This is where you meet Ezra, which is the next character you pick up, who... I don't know if I was just, like, not paying as close of attention to some stuff, but, like, it really felt like there was more to his story that you didn't really get a lot of time with. Like, how his, like... his parents left him, and or he was waiting somewhere with his parents, and flew away on his giant eagle that he has for some reason.
Yes.
And then when he came back, they were gone, but all their stuff was still there. So something happened to his parents, and I don't know. I just thought that would get explored more.
Fair.
Because like most of his dialogue is kind of like jokes and like little kid observations, and there's a whole thing about him kind of like if you play it this way of like Junebug and Johnny kind of adopting him.
Yeah.
So you get that, but like you don't really get to explore like what actually happened with him that much.
Yeah. So Ezra's one of my favorite characters in this game for like the amount of like interesting shit that he brings to the table. First of all, when you first meet him, he's kind of like on a pedestal.
Yeah.
And I was interpreting it might have been forced perspective, or like forced not forced perspective, where you assume it is forced perspective, but really he's right there. I thought he was a grown adult man until the bird flies you away. And then like you show up and he's like a wood nymph and running legs real high in the air.
He's got his suit on.
But yeah, he's wearing this like little white suit all the time, and he plays out in the dirt, but the suit is spotless white at all times.
It does. That's one of the things that feels the most Twin Peaks about this. Like Ezra feels like he could be a lodge resident.
He really does. But there's this like, so in chapter 4, and I don't know if this is like an only if you choose to do this thing or if you get this information otherwise, but you can go mushroom hunting with Ezra and Kate. And Ezra has this like brief bit of backstory where he undergoes some form of trauma, and I don't think it's ever really described, like an injury or something happens to him. And his parents put him in the car, and presumably he's like distant and he's not like paying attention to it. My interpretation is that Ezra was like put in an asylum or up for adoption, or he is dead and is a ghost. All of these things I think are equally possible based on what I know about him. Because even like June, Bug, and Johnny, they talk about being like gray, faceless things that grew into their identity. And there's like an element of metaphor to that where you assume that they just mean like they were anything, but then they learned music and it gave them like an expression for what was inside, and they became the people they were. But also their character models are flat gray and don't have any facial features.
Well, I mean, that's all of the characters.
Yeah. Well, but except they're not all gray.
No.
The fact that they have no color and shit makes me feel like maybe they aren't like quote unquote real humans. I think that
I thought they were just pale because they travel on the Zero and stuff.
Yeah, they could just be like vampire pale.
Stowaway's underground.
I have a very like supernatural interpretation of this game.
I think you're spot on with Ezra.
And by spot on, you mean one of those three spots.
Well, yeah. Well, that's as close as you can get. Because as I was getting at, like, I feel like they could have gone into him more.
Yeah.
He always felt a little bit too nebulous, and as a result, ended up probably being my least favorite character. But I don't know. Maybe that's just me.
Yeah, it could just be a personal preference thing. Like, I like the mystery with Ezra.
Yeah, I mean, like, I love a good mystery. It's why I like the first act so much. I don't think they give you quite enough to chew on with him.
Fair.
For my tastes.
It is very curious as to why he has a big eagle.
Yeah, and that's just no one ever comments on how, like, fantastical that is.
Yeah.
But
anyway, they do also just jump onto, like, a metaphysical highway at some point.
True.
So.
Like, an underground highway seems way more plausible than a giant eagle.
Let's think about the Zero, though, is it isn't just underground.
Well,
like, there's something fucky with it.
It's like an
alternate
dimension corridor thing.
Yeah. So I think there's like an element. I mean, Conway obviously is like so far gone mentally.
Delirious old man.
Like by the time that you're like the events of the game take place, that he could drive a truck straight to hell like a fucking Deep Purple album cover, and like it would just make sense for him. He'd be like, that's fine, I'll do that. He kind of goes along with the whole like driving truck for the Consolidated Power Company as well.
Oh yeah,
he's so like complacent with it. He has like the one goal.
It felt like there was a supernatural element to that too. Like he seemed so into it that it seemed like maybe he was brainwashed.
Yeah, I mean that's some Act 3 discussion.
From drinking the alcohol, I think.
The hard times whiskey.
Yeah,
there it is. We'll Act 3 I think has a lot of meat that I want to go into. During the whole of Act 2, though, it is like your biggest time to like sort of learn the zero and like what it is and the shit on it. But a lot of the scenes are really sort of like vague. There's not like a whole lot that actually occurs and drives the plot forward until you get to between the Bureau and the Doctor. It's just kind of like going back and forth and just sort of talking about stuff. You get a little bit of backstory on Conway. You get like nothing on Shannon.
Yeah, Shannon, even though like Conway's your first character you get, I think Shannon ends up being like the audience surrogate. She's like the normal person in the group.
It's also
air quotes.
Yeah. She's a normal person who happens to carry around batteries, a degausser, several feet of wiring.
Right. Well, she fixes old TVs.
Yeah.
Like everyone else in the game, she's a hipster.
True. Well, maybe. Like we've talked about before, it's unsure what like the time period is.
Yeah, but all of like the trappings of this game are very, very hipster.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that in a bad way. Just lots of things like the kind of music and the things that are alluded to are just kind of in that vein.
Yeah. There's like a new vein of hipster that this speaks to, I think, more than like the vein of hipster that I was. Like I feel like there
are many shades of hipster.
Yeah, I'm like an older fashioned hipster than these newfangled millennial hipsters, because like I don't really like jive with the whole like vaporwave aesthetic. And they really like there's like Junebug and Johnny are like they're those like they're talking about like the how they use just like recorded sounds. The one lady just plays she set a world record for playing the theremin for 24 hours uninterrupted.
Yeah, they're the kind of people that would just tape record anything and put it in a song and call it art because it's something that exists that they recorded. And, you know, like...
And it's like...
that kind of thoughtless
I feel
quirkiness.
Like they're supposed to come off as weird...
Yeah.
But also noble, in a sense. And I think they pull it off. Like, Junebug and Johnny end up being some of the more, like, they seem like the most interesting characters by the end of it.
Well, I think they feel the most relatable to us, because I feel like they're supposed to be around our age, and they're that kind of, like, disillusioned, like...
They're doomers.
Yeah, like, they've hit that point in their life where, like, they realize... what life really is, and you know, like, you know what I'm talking about.
I do.
It sounds dour and depressing, much like life is.
Yeah, but that's just life.
Yeah, like they've kind of had this idea of the kind of things they wanted to do and all that, and you know, and now they're just kind of like poor 20-something-year-olds traveling around
on a motorcycle.
Yeah.
I want to... Okay, so there's one thing that happens in Act 2 that is stupid, but I want to mention it. It's like a mechanical thing that I just found interesting. A lot of the time during this game, you'll just have like an ambient action button that you can click on to just do a thing. And when you're in the Museum of Dwellings, there's an umbrella button. Because unbeknownst to you, you can walk... Later, you will walk up onto an elevator and go up to the roof. And it's raining.
This exact same thing happened to me. I know what you're going to say.
Yeah, and you go like, what's this button do? And you pull the umbrella up and you're like, cool. And then the guy who's talking about the security camera footage comments about how you're a crazy person because you were walking around with the umbrella open indoors. I just love that. Like, I love that it gives you the option and then acknowledges it.
That's not what happened to me.
Oh, nice.
I thought this is what you were going to say is you ride the elevator up. It gets to the top, you see that it's raining, and you assume the action button is to put the umbrella up, but it's actually to make the elevator go back down. So I had to ride the elevator back down and then back up, and it's really slow and takes forever, and then you have to walk out of the elevator and then hit the action button, and then he'll put the umbrella up.
Score 1 for being a stupid person and just walking around with an umbrella all the time.
Yep. So I thought you were going to complain about how that was designed and it took forever.
Nope. We'll get to Act 4 later. After the break. Welcome back.
Thanks.
You're welcome. We already kind of talked about the entertainment earlier, so I don't want to dwell on it for too long. This was really an interesting interstitial, and the one that made me sort of like codify this game in the way that it is actually set up, where it's like act where you focus on the main cast of characters, interstitial where you focus on a secondary set of characters who will eventually become important.
Mm-hmm.
But I do want to say, just on the plot of the entertainment itself, and maybe it's me, maybe I'm just this kind of a person,
Mm-hmm.
I found it to be strangely moving. Like, like the whole of this game is not like, it didn't speak to me on like a allegorical level. A lot of the issues that it describes are sort of like worldwide issues, things like housing issues and fucking like small businesses crumbling in the economy. Capitalism. Space.
Yes, not space. This
Not
is not about that.
It's the last place that isn't corrupted
It's about
by capitalism.
space-time on the Route Zero.
Got him. But it's a lot of things that, fortunately, haven't really affected me in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And the concept of the entertainment deals with debt. And Conway's story reflects this as well. He's somebody who sort of like feels like he owes a debt to... he refers to her as Liz. It's like Lysette or Lysan. I don't remember, but like the owner of the antique shop, because she's sort of, he's like her caretaker as she like slips into dementia, and his like final monologue before he's like erased from the story, and then in the following act is about like how important it is to sort of like square up, like make sure that everything is like taken care of before you die,
Right.
and the villains of the narrative are the Consolidated Power Company, which is a not particularly subtle play on an electric company that would use the word power in the electric power sort of definition, but they are like buying up all of the resources around this area of Kentucky, making them a consolidated power, like they have power over things.
Right.
And the way that they're represented is with electric glowing skeletons.
Yeah.
And so it's this really sad story about like somebody who wants to move on with their life. Two people, actually, because there's the woman whose husband sells hammers, and then the woman who's gonna cut her parents off and try and move and make a name for herself somewhere else. And then the parents they're celebrating, which they say over and over again,
Right.
a promotion that isn't actually happening.
Right.
And
It's an excuse.
Yeah, it's an extremely melancholy story that they play out, and Harry ends up being just a dude.
Right.
But all of it is like, I don't know. It's sad and it's grounded, and then the reveal at the end is the aforementioned electric glowing skeleton who has come to collect, I guess.
Right.
And I don't know. I thought it was really powerful, and will probably be the thing I talk about if people ask me to describe this game.
Yeah. I liked it a lot as well. I thought the interface was a little clunky, though. Like, it was kind of hard to figure out how to advance the story sometimes. Like, you felt like you had to look around at literally everything between every scene.
Yes.
So that was the only thing. There was some friction there where I felt like maybe I was doing something wrong the whole time. But other than that, yeah, I agree. Like, narratively, it was really good.
Yeah, that would not be the first or last time in this game that I felt like I was somehow mechanically doing something wrong.
Right.
I agree with that. Mechanically, this is not really the medium for the story that it was telling.
Right. And this one, the entertainment was designed to be played in VR, weirdly.
Yeah.
Even though it's on a lot of platforms that don't support VR. Like, well, I guess the Switch does.
I doubt that it's Labo compatible, though.
I mean, you could slot your Switch into the Labo headset, and well, I guess the gyro wouldn't be enabled, so never mind.
Did you play this game with the Pro Controller mostly?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm wondering if you had the Joy-Cons, if you could do that.
It's a good question.
But I don't know. That would be interesting. I feel like it's probably outside of the budget of...
Well, I mean, the Pro Controller has gyro, too.
True.
So.
It would be... I don't know what I'm fucking talking about. It might be the same as far as I know.
Yeah. But anyway. That's the entertainment.
Yes. And it was entertaining. But I do agree with you, though, and I think that this bleeds into the next act in some way, where the idea that, like, a lot of what you were doing was kind of just sitting and reading. Mm-hmm. Like, it was essentially a comic book for that entire duration, and the whole thing is, like, it took me, like, 45 minutes or so to get through it. Like,
it was long, yeah.
It's really long. And actually, Act 3 might be my, like, high point for it. Mm-hmm. I feel like it's really clean.
Yeah, Xanadu is really cool. It's one of the cooler things in the game.
Yeah. But yeah, so this is where you meet up with Junebug and Johnny, who we've already talked about. You go to the bar that we've already talked about. But there's something in the bar that I do want to talk about.
The song?
Is a song. The game does not have a lot of music. It has some. It's sparse. It's often very quiet. Like, exceedingly whisper quiet.
Yeah, and it's got, like, it's, like, kind of droning and kind of what you would expect from, like, seeing the game.
Yeah. And the song that... I mean, Junebug and Johnny's song is probably the most, like, upbeat. Not tonally, but, like, as far as, like, it's loud. It has, like, a power behind it.
It has a drum beat with a tempo. Yeah.
All of that is in this song, and it's the only time that they ever do this, really. And it's interesting. Like, I forgot to mention when we were talking about Act 2, the clicking of the sign when you get to the bureau felt so weird when it happened, because it was this constant tempo that just wasn't present ever in the rest of the game. And then this song also felt really out of place, but in, like, a good way. It's kind of like the reverse of the You and I song from that Twin Peaks episode.
Oh, yeah.
Where it feels out of place in a terrible way.
Yeah, I like that the roof of the bar goes away when they play. Like, it just really fits, because, like, they are late to perform, and, like, when you show up and they just play for you, like, there's something about the setup and then the song that they sing. It works.
And I like that you can kind of, like, nudge where the lyrics are going as, like, part of, like, the mechanical implementation of it.
Yeah.
Which is really cool. And you get to do that again with the poem.
Yeah, at the end.
At the end of the game. But it's very cool. And from that point, you do get back on 0.
And I like that you have the little motorcycle following you.
Yeah, as you, like, drive around. And they say they'll lead you there, but if you take the lead and drive, they'll stay behind you. But if you do a dumb thing and pull off the road like I did, they will go ahead and you can like follow them.
I did not know that.
Yeah, it's very, like, the even the icon of a motorcycle has a little bit of personality to it. But yeah, so you end up back on 0 and at the bureau, and then then the Hall of the Mountain King comes in between.
Yeah.
So this is the meat of Act 3, and is the conclusion of like the Lula Chamberlain stuff that we talked about before.
Mm-hmm.
Like this game, we've been jumping all over the place.
Sure have.
Yeah. But you said that you liked the Xanadu part.
Yeah, Act 3 is my second favorite for sure. Yeah, like just because I think it's because it has like that strong core to it of the Hall of the Mountain King, and the story of like him and his research assistants and that computer. You need like some kind of magical like linchpin to kind of spin the story around, I think. But it's his old computer. He said he worked on this like software. It's like a perfect simulation of some bullshit. I don't know. It's kind of cryptic.
Yeah.
But you have to go and find like a password or whatever to get it to work, because it's all like scrambled by the skeletons from the Consolidated Power Company, and that's kind of the reveal of those.
Yeah. What's super strange about it is everything, but what's very unexpected for me is there's this like I'm gonna get back to Xanadu at some point.
Oh yeah,
but like the story of that like team, the expedition team who's making the software that runs Xanadu, is that they go out and they go into this pit, and in the pit they find these tunnels, like crystal tunnels and shit, and presumably this is the same pit that's on Dogwood Drive that you find at the end of Act 5. But you go in and they find them, and they find the strangers who speak with these like tape recorders, and those are the skeletons who are the people who are in debt to the power company, and also maybe work for them, and also make whiskey, etc., all the things that they do. I don't understand their purpose in this whole like narrative, like the fact that they go
like in
down
Act
there,
3 or the whole game.
in the whole game, and I mean specifically Lula and John and guy whose name we forgot.
Right.
Like they do this whole thing, and he is like personally involved. Like he wants he's making the simulation of something that he's already done, presumably so that he knows what to do next. But it's not like explicitly said. That's just what I think. But like, why were the skeletons there in the first place?
I think that's just was giving you like an origin of like that's just where they came from.
It's underground.
Yeah. And in like the crystal caves. And like I guess the power company just uses them as workers and turns other people into them or whatever. So I think it was just supposed to be like a cool origin story for them. Yeah.
And it's got this neat like setup in when Conway gets his leg crushed, which we didn't mention, kind of important.
Yeah, in Act 1 you end up meeting Shannon at a mine that her parents used to work at. And you go down in there for, I can't remember what reason. Oh, you're looking for the entrance to the Zero.
Yeah, and she's looking for something that she is looking for.
And she leads you down there by telling you that it might lead you to the Zero. Anyway, and then you end up getting your leg crushed while you're down there.
Yeah. So you do, and you go to this doctor, and he gives you a drug, and the owners of the pharmaceutical company who makes the drug has been purchased by the Consolidated Power Company, as is tradition. And when you wake up, your leg is gone. You now have a glowing skeleton leg.
Yeah.
And it's weird. I didn't think that it was going to be a permanent thing when I first saw it, but it is just what your leg looks like for the rest of the game. Or what Conway's leg is. You don't even know who you're going to be responding as. So it's really difficult to say that like Conway is the main playable character, even though he does take a lion's share of the text.
He is in like the first half of the game, and then he just isn't anymore.
Yeah,
as we talk, like that's what I was talking about when I say like the priorities seem like they shift as you go between the episodes.
But yeah, so his leg is gone, but then you go through this tour. They think that you're applying to be a driver for them, and at the end of it, he informs you that because you took this drink of the top shelf whiskey, but it wasn't your first shift drink, that means you have to pay them back, so you have to start working for them to work off that debt.
Well, I think you're in debt to them from the operation.
Right. That's what made me realize what was going on. Once again, not a super subtle metaphor, but the fact that after that your arm is replaced with a skeletal arm. It cost an arm and a leg. Like, literally, your leg and arm have been replaced by this skeleton thing. And, man, like, I didn't realize it initially. And, like, looking back, like, if I explained this to someone, they'd be like, that's like the gas station sign where they put arm and leg as, like, the fuel prices. Like, it's kind of just almost a bad joke. But, like, the reveal, the fact that I had to come to that conclusion myself...
Yeah,
I actually loved that.
Yeah, it's subtle enough. Like, it's spaced out, too. Like, you get the skeleton leg in the beginning of Act 2, and then you don't get the skeleton arm till, like, Act 4.
It's like when the very end of Act 3, I think.
So it's spaced out enough that you don't think about it right away.
Yeah.
You're used to the skeleton leg by that point.
In as much as you can be.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the only other element of this act that we haven't talked about is Xanadu, which sounds like a broken record, but plays like a text-based adventure game.
But it has visuals, too.
Yeah.
So it almost feels like a really, really, really old, like, computer game.
And it's even, like, contextualized in that way, like, with, like, the weird resource management game that you can play for... I don't know how long. I quit after like 5 rounds.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's really crazy, and I love that the vector visuals are like super good.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Just really like evocative. That's probably not even the right word.
Yeah, much like with the Zero itself, like representing like a cave, like the walls of a cave with those kind of lines, just is a really cool visual. Like, it almost kind of makes you think of like a topographic map, or, you know, like that kind of organic shape represented with that, and then the black like kind of represents like the blackness of a cave. Yeah, evocative is a good word. Like, it's evocative of a cave in like a weird primitive technology way, which is a weird mix.
It really is. But no, I also love that. I did not love the horrible noises that it made all the time.
Yeah, that was a bit much. I was playing it out in the living room and was like, even though no one was around, I'm like, oh, this is a little obnoxiously loud. Like, I hope I'm not disturbing anybody.
But yeah, so then you go into Act 4. You get picked up by the mud mammoth.
The muddy mammoth or mud mammoth.
The murky mammoth.
Something like that. It's a boat.
Yes. That just has a big mammoth on it for some reason.
It's mechanical, yeah.
A mechanical mammoth.
But yeah, the only way to get to Dogwood Drive is to travel along the Echo River.
Of course.
You find out.
And so Act 4 is the most dynamic of all of them. I think is easy to
Yeah, this feels like the foundation for its own separate game. Like, it's so much of a new like format change. Like, it's a pretty big shift.
So I kind of want to go, like, just for my own curiosity, what of the major things did you end up doing?
I went off the boat for everything except Shannon watching the videotapes.
Right, which I also did. But I didn't go to the gas station.
Okay, yeah. That's with Junebug, Johnny, and Ezra.
Right. In my version of that, Johnny learns about how to drive the boat, and they also give him a map. Obviously, none of this ever comes up. But you do find a cool rock that looks like a dinosaur, and they tell you about a cliff that has a story written on it. And all of that's very cool, and I liked it a lot. I don't know what happens in the gas station.
Nothing too significant. The gas station is one that just floats along the river that seems to only just show up when you need it. More magical realism stuff.
Right.
It's the Travers town of gas stations. And the guy who runs it is like real lonely because he only ever like has people like random weird people come into the shop, and ends up being just kind of like Junebug and Johnny talking about adopting Ezra if you lead the conversation that way.
Gotcha.
Like having another person there to run the drum machine.
You gotta run that drum machine.
Yeah, etc. There's also a dog there, and like you can steer the conversation in that direction of like them getting a dog. Like it's kind of focuses on them as a couple and like kind of wanting a kid but not having a kid, like adopting something.
Maybe
to take
because
care
they're
of.
literally clay.
Yes, because they're ghosts. They're clay golems.
Maybe they're Human Clay by Creed. Does anyone remember that's the name of Creed's album?
No. I had no idea what you were talking about. But yeah, that's what happens off the boat in that scenario.
I don't know if you hit anything. None of the things that I did, there was the sequence where you go to the like questionnaire facility that's very and gives it like it ties stories together but not in a way that is like particularly meaningful. Like one of the operators who works there was the girlfriend of Charlie, who is the kid of the couple that Conway works for, who Kanye got drunk, couldn't do a job, and he dies on the job. So that's, like, weird, but it's not, like, they don't show up later. Like, you don't meet with Mimi and whatever the other person's name was.
Yeah. The game does that sort of thing a couple times where you take the perspective of someone watching a videotape. I just thought that was really cool.
Okay.
That really fits, I think.
I wasn't sure if you were going to take that in a positive or a negative.
Oh, no, I think that's really cool. Like, the context of, like, this stuff's already happened and you're watching it later is interesting.
Yeah. It's, it allows him to do a lot of weird things with tense as well, which is a weird thing to want to do strange things with. But the fact that, like, in certain sequences, it's implied to have already happened, so it's always like, this is what you've always done. Like, this was the thing that had happened, and there's not changing.
Predestination.
Yeah. It gives it, like, an eerie, uncanny kind of feeling to any sequence that isn't taking place in the present.
Yeah.
But I like it. I like it a lot. So one of the things you do in Act 4, if you don't leave the boat, is there you go. I think it's scene 4. If you choose to see what Blue is doing, Blue and Dynamite,
right?
It plays a 4-second clip of them sitting in on a bench, and nothing happens, and then it goes to scene 5.
That's an amazing joke.
It's so good. Because like you talk to Blue, or sorry, it doesn't always have to be Blue. You can give it a male name, a female name, or no name. But the dog in the straw hat that's on the cover.
I think Blue is gender neutral.
That's true, but they refer to Blue as a girl, and whatever the male name is as a boy.
Right.
But either way, they do that sequence, and like if I can be asked to do it, I will put that up on YouTube before this episode goes up, because I saved a clip of it because it's so short. I just thought it'd be funny. But yeah, so the major thing that happens here is this boat sequence. And I want to talk about the boat sequence because it's fucking strange. It takes a bazillion years, and Kanye.
I want to commission a remake of this game where instead of Conway, it's Kanye West the whole game. Kanye Route Zero. The sequel to Conway Quest.
I want the opposite, where they hire a 70-year-old man to do covers of every Kanye West song. Conway West.
Well, both can happen. They'll trade places.
There, perfect. It's a multimedia experience. Conway gets abducted at the end of it. Did you think that you were supposed to control the boat with the control stick?
I did try and do that. I don't know. At the beginning, it felt like impossible to get the boat to move at all.
Yes.
But then once it like got unstuck or whatever happened, it was fine.
Yeah. I don't know.
I think where you moved the light was where he steered it.
I'm hoping that is the case and that I wasn't just futilely moving the control stick around. But by the end of it, I didn't know if I needed to use the control stick.
Yeah, there was a lack of feedback there.
Yeah. But no, if there was ever a I'm going to die soon speech in media, Conway gives it in this segment. Obviously the sequence where he like gives her the truck is like a pretty obvious one, but like the whole conversation leading in, and like he's kind of drunk at that point, like you can see him slipping, and I don't know, I really liked the scene, but it was really fighting with me against the fact that it was so slow and so long. And I was like, and I didn't know if I was doing it right or if there was a faster way to go. Like if they had just told me at the beginning, like the boat will move on its own, and it did, this would be like one of my favorite scenes of the whole game. But because I was also fighting with the controls, it made me less like in love with it. Yeah. But very good.
I was fine with the scene all the way through. It felt like it kind of ended abruptly, and like Conway's abduction and like kind of lack of resolution felt bad to me. Like the whole fifth act, I was waiting for like a flash sideways to see what he was doing, and like I don't know, I wanted some kind of closure for him that you just never get.
Yeah. I don't disagree. I mean, I do, but I don't, not strongly.
Yeah.
I would have liked to have seen one more look at him.
Yeah. It's like, I don't even like need to see him after that. Like, it just feels like that whole episode, it's just kind of like, oh, he's drinking, and you don't get to see much of him, and he doesn't do a whole lot. And then it's just like, oh, now he's gone. Now he's leaving. Like, it just didn't feel like that got enough build up for, like, as far as him as, like, a character. We didn't get, like, scenes.
Well, part of that is also because you left the boat every time.
True.
He mostly stays on the boat. I think he entirely stays on the boat for the... he does stand outside when you're doing the questionnaire sequence.
Yeah, and he also, the part where everyone goes and uses the telephone.
Oh, right. That's where the dog sitting
he's there, and he like jumps off. He doesn't use the telephone. He jumps off the raft and swims back to the boat. And no one really seems all that concerned that a drunk old man is swimming in the river, but...
Yeah. It's a little strange.
It just, I don't know. It just felt really weird to me.
Yeah.
The way that was handled.
Yeah, and there's a lot of stuff like this. The whole act, I think, feels like the game could be like morph, as you said, like into a totally different game. Like if there was a spin-off game that was just about
the Echo River. Yeah.
Like I feel like there's enough here to set up.
It kind of feels like that's what it wants to be.
Yeah. There's like a ghost ship that like travels around that they briefly mention, but nothing really ever comes of it.
Yeah, there's a whole lot of things that come and go. Like pretty much every scene off the boat, if the river is visible, like at least one or two significant seeming things like float by in the background.
Yep. It's strange.
So yeah, it does feel like a living world.
Yeah, I mean, I assume that's the appeal.
Yeah.
But my thing with I felt like Conway's story ended in a way that was like reasonable. Like, I think that there's especially if you choose all the dialogue options when you're inspecting the truck to trigger all the flashbacks to go and like learn about what he was doing before he was like where he is right now. You get this sense where he just feels like defeated. His story sucks and is sad. Like he is definitely a miserable guy who's trying to portray himself as not being completely miserable. And like him slipping back into drinking is like the thing that pushes him along to sort of accepting this inevitability.
Yeah, I mean, I even like that on paper, and like I don't need it to be like a happy ending or anything. It's just like I feel like the presentation of it or like the execution feels like it's missing a piece for me.
Yeah. And like I said, I don't disagree. I think that there are some things that could have been done to sort of like, if anything, just clarify. Like, you spend long enough with the character that it feels like... Because you kind of understand where Shannon's at the end of the game.
Yeah.
But you don't really know with Conway.
Yeah. It's like... Because you have, like, all these conversations... Or a handful of conversations with Shannon and Conway where she's like, maybe you don't have to go work for them. And he's always like, You know, and, like, that happens, like, a handful of times, but... no one ever really seems that concerned about it. You know, like there's like some kind of a disconnect like in that way where they never really talk about it and then it just kind of happens and then they don't really seem like they're that sad about it. You know, like they're never like, oh, should we like go at least check up on him? Like, should we go visit him maybe? Like, nope, move on.
Yeah, it feels like everyone, and this is part of the reason why Junebug and Johnny feel like such, like fleshed out characters in comparison, is everybody else feels like they're keeping like kind of a professional distance from everybody, where they're like, the narrative refers to Conway as Shannon's friend like multiple times. Like,
yeah,
they'll say her friend as a pronoun for Conway, and but it never really feels like that, or if it does, it feels like it's strained, and I think that's why people don't talk about it.
Yeah,
it's weird because Shannon's the one who would, and you can sort of navigate conversations to do it, but it's never like it never sounds as bad as it is.
Right. I don't know if I have much else to say about it, but
yeah, no, neither do I.
But speaking of like the whole setup of the way this act works, though, where it has like the split between the boat and off boat, I think it's a cool idea, but I think by the fourth act you're pretty clued in to the idea that the decisions don't really change the story at all. So much so that like I have absolutely no desire to replay the act to see what the other scenes are. So I think the linearity of it and the insignificance of the choices kind of hurt this act overall.
Yeah.
Even though I like it in concept.
I agree actually. I think that it does sort of, and it's not, I don't think it's the linearity of the narrative, and well, not the narrative, but like the game, of playing the game, hurts this act specifically. But I think that the lack of impact that the choices make up to this point does make the fourth act feel like a massive departure, and it hurts a lot more when you go into a scene and then don't get what happens described to you. Like, you want to know because you're now invested in all the characters and you just have to make these choices. And sometimes I would agree with that. I would say, yeah, make the choices mean something so that the player actually thinks about them. Mm-hmm. But I don't know. In this case, it doesn't work so much. Like, I love the fact that I got to watch the two dogs sit there for 4 seconds. But also, I do want to know what the fuck is going on. And I feel like I missed like a pretty big chunk of stuff that could explain some things. So, I don't know.
Yep. Is it interesting? like this game gets more experimental as it goes, and I think if you're thinking about it from that angle, I think this act is a success.
Yeah.
But like as the whole package, it's muddier. The Muddy Mammoth.
It's the Muddy Mammoth.
But yeah, that's Act 4.
I don't know if because we're already going a little bit long.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't want to jump back and talk about the phone call.
Oh, right.
It was cool, and I loved it.
It's pretty funny. It's the most tongue-in-cheek thing.
Yes, and like the guy who delivers the narration has like kind of a Bob Ross thing going on. I loved it all around. There was like a gag that was like, if you're listening to organ music right now, press this button. So I hit the button. It was like, you are? He says, oh, lucky you. Does it sound like this? And it plays a 4-minute clip of an organ song playing. And then it goes, is that the music you're listening to? Yes or no? And I said, yes. And he goes, oh, great. I don't know where it's coming from. Let's listen to it again. And it plays the whole clip over again. Shit like that. Like I was busting guts.
Yeah, the whole snake thing. It gets to a point where it's like, if you're doing this, call this number. And like I got to the snake thing like after I'd already done a whole bunch of other crap. Mm-hmm. So like I was like, oh, I'm gonna like write that number down, hang up the phone, and then call it. But then I hung up the phone, and then it was just like started the dialogue where it was like, oh, let's move on.
Yeah.
This is over. So I didn't get to call that number.
You can call back. Like if you hit, you can tell them no. 'Cause I did the same thing to tell them that I couldn't sleep. But because I wasn't on a phone, I had a controller in my hand.
Right.
I couldn't tell them anything, so I just had to hang up and then I moved on. But yeah, there are extensions and they do work, but I don't know if there's any payoff to any of it.
Gotcha.
Act 5.
Act 5. So one thing that I wanted to bring up the whole time, but this seemed like the place to do it is, so we talked about how like it changes as the acts go on, and I think part of what it's doing is it's widening the gap between the characters and the player with each act, and it kind of culminates in this one where the whole act is you controlling a dragonfly or a bird, and the cat that they had on the boat is chasing it around. So you're the most disconnected from the characters in this one.
Yes.
Than you are from the whole rest of the game.
Also, I think it's a bird.
See, to me, it looked like a dragonfly.
It's real small.
Yeah, it looked like it had like a mass with wings and then like a tail coming off of it to me. So I thought it was a dragonfly, but
it moves real fast, real hard to tell. But either way, cats would chase either. Mm-hmm. So I think both are valid. Yeah, I agree, and I think because this is like a narrative delivery story exclusively, and is preceded by this interlude that is like the most eerie thing of like this shitty, almost falling down TV studio.
Mm-hmm, it's leaking.
Yeah. And this big storm that comes through and kills the 2 horses and destroys most of the town with it. And when you come back, like as the main party, it's the town, it's been destroyed. And there's no resolution to like the central mysteries of the game. Obviously, this is an intentional choice. Mm-hmm. I don't think that the game would have necessarily been better if Weaver had been there in like a white flowing dress as doves fly overhead or whatever. And they're like, it was all the afterlife. Uh-huh. Lost season 6.
Spoilers.
But the fact that it is like this sunny sequence and nobody is like really put out. Like, no one in the town is...
Well, no one you talk to. There are a bunch of, like, black specters that I think are supposed to represent just like, random people in the town. Or they could be ghosts.
If
you want to go with the supernatural reading.
I was going to ask how you read that.
Yeah, I read that as just people in the town that
aren't important.
Yeah, they make them not clutter everything up. But I mean, there was the storm and the horses died, so they could be dead people. But then, why are the dead people not acknowledged and the horses are?
Yeah,
if that's the case. So I think they are real people, but they're not important. So they're represented as just like a wispy black mass.
Yeah, my read on it was that they were the quote-unquote people of nowhere.
Yeah.
That
they do make a couple mentions to, like, making, like, offhand jokes, I think, at least in context, that, like, the town is haunted.
Yeah, and, well, they talk about, like, in the interstitial, there's a sequence where they're trying to find, like, ghosts by listening in between the channels, like the static on the radio. And Ron, who is Ron, is one of the most, like, unexplainable characters in the game. Like, none of his behavior makes any sense. The only character that he has any kind of, like, significant conversation with is a cat and is not responding to him. He says he's the one who feeds the ghosts and that his barn is haunted. So
yeah, I forgot about that line.
Yeah. Like, there's something up, and I don't know if it's actually ghosts.
Yeah, but, it is hard to tell.
Yeah, even like the idea of the people of nowhere, or the whatever it is that they like, the thing that talks about them in game, and I don't know if this is like a bilingual bonus type situation, is in Spanish, so I don't know what it was talking about. It's staticky and quiet, so I don't know if I would have heard it even if I did speak Spanish.
Right.
They just kind of describe them as a society that used to be here and isn't here anymore.
Souls trapped on the zero.
Yeah. So I have no idea if that is, but that's just how I read it, because there were too many other things to think about, and I just put it in a box that I found.
Yeah, I don't even really mind that stuff so much. I actually think those kinds of details in a story like this kind of just make it better when they're left unanswered. It just, the whole thing with the main party, like where 5 Dogwood Drive is just like this shell of a house, and no one lives there, but there was a bunch of furniture and they all just kind of move into it.
Yeah.
That's like it's cute.
Right.
It's like kind of interesting, but like kind of comes out of nowhere. And I don't know, I feel like, once again, kind of like with Conway, it feels like there's some kind of a missing element. Like, I do like it, but it kind of like, what else is going on here?
My read on the narrative, now, the parts of this are just not related to how I'm thinking about this. But Weaver, who ran away and then basically has interactions with everybody that you run into.
I kind of feel like Weaver's definitely not real.
Could not be real, but none of this could be real.
True.
Also.
Yeah.
I feel like the fact that she cuts into the TV station with the message that she's trying to deliver to maybe anyone, but almost certainly Shannon, and leads her to the zero. In addition to that, furniture is what Conway was delivering. It was in the truck, and so I think that she was trying to bring people to the town in order to create a new beginning. Right. Now, what I don't understand, and like this podcast is gonna give me imposter syndrome, because I feel like I have like an okay eye for like interpreting shit, but this feels like it goes beyond me. Like, why did the storm destroy the town? Like, was that a random act? Was that an act of God, as they talk about?
If what you're saying is correct, or if we're assuming it's correct, I think she knew that was going to happen, and that's why she was trying to get new people to go there.
Right.
To move in to replace the people that died.
Yeah. But that's like, what's the motivation for that?
I don't know. She seems like a weird chaos god. Doesn't she? She just kind of...
Well, yeah. She just says things, and if you go against her will, she throws you off course and does some weird shit. I mean, definitely a chaos god, if a god of any kind.
Yes, a chaos ghost.
Chaos ghost. Anyway, so they sing a sad song, and then the game ends.
Yep.
Which is really dismissive. I did love this fifth act.
I mean, yeah, it's really cool, and like, while I think the cat chasing the dragonfly method of delivering it kind of hurts it narratively a little bit by making you feel like more disconnected from it, mechanically very cool and distinct, and makes the fifth act really memorable.
And you can do the flying cat trick.
Yeah, and you can do the flying cat glitch.
And the fact that like it's just sort of, because the whole fifth, it just takes place over the course of the entire day as you run around.
To me, like I think that you were correct. It is just one day, but like the way you moved around and people were like kind of warping to different places made it feel like it took place over like a whole week to me.
Right, yeah.
But
well, it is like, because people start talking to each other and then they like develop friendships and shit. Like the guy who's fucking around with like the oils on who does the weather report, Elmo.
Oh yeah.
Becomes friends with Johnny, which feels natural and like a thing that would actually happen. But it does happen in like real life time, 8 seconds. My interpretation time, like maybe a few hours. Your interpretation time, like 3 days. That makes more sense.
Oh yeah. Like it seems like so much happens that this couldn't have just been one afternoon.
That woman paints like an entire mural of two horses,
and the guy digs the graves, etc., etc. The guy fixes the plane. Yeah.
Well, I don't know if I guess he fixes.
Well,
it.
He gets the motor running.
Yeah.
The engine. I mean,
what?
Get your motor running. Head out on the highway.
There's a lot that happens with a lot of people, and it's really disorienting, like what you have to be doing in order to move things along. But it gives sort of like an element of activity to everything. And I think it works. The fifth act is really, it's weird because I would never say it's my favorite act, but it's really good at what it does in a way that is totally different than the rest of the game.
Once again, kind of like Act 4, it feels like it could be its own foundation for a completely different game.
I would probably rather play the Act 4 game than the Act 5 game, but do you have any other notes?
I wanted to comment on the visual style. The character models are very low polygon counts, kind of like solid blocky colors, and it's mostly like zoomed out wide camera angles. So like it kind of made me think about like playing games as a kid when games were like pixel art and like low fidelity, and your imagination had to like fill in the blanks. And so it's like an interesting thing to think about, like, would kids think that pixel art games look old now, or would they be able to do the same thing with it, and like think now as an adult, like, has my ability to do that diminished? You know, it's just like an interesting thing to think about from time to time. And I think this proves that no, it hasn't, because even though the fidelity is low and the camera's zoomed out, like your imagination does, I think, fill in a lot of the blanks, and you don't even think about how simple it looks. And even though none of the characters have faces, I feel like I have an idea of what their faces look like.
Right.
You know? So, like, I don't know. It just made me think about that kind of stuff. Like,
yeah, I think that the visual style does a lot for this game. In addition to being like striking and strange, because like this isn't the style. This looks like another world.
Yeah,
not literally.
Like I had another game that I compared it to like early on when I was playing it, and then I completely forgot what it was and have not been able to remember.
There are definitely other games that use this style, but this has like I think it's the way that it uses color and light mostly gives it a really unique look to it, and the game is very good at symbols. The fact that, I guess, I don't know if that's even the word you want to use, but like when I think of this game, when I thought of Act 1, you think of Equus Oils with the big horse head and the gas station and the sunset coming down. And when you think of like in Act 2, there's like the sequence where you're outside of the mines and there's like the house in the background, and like it has the sense of depth, but it's pretty flat color wise, so it's like strange. The barn scene, it's good really
set pieces.
Yeah, the set piece, that's probably a better way of putting it. But it does that, which gives it this like unique kind of vibe to it. But it also makes the game feel really weird as well, because like a lot of the time you're moving like 2D, but you have a little bit of 3D motion because the characters are modeled,
right?
Which makes it strange as well, and the visuals kind of aid in that like unrealness of it.
Yeah, and it doesn't fare as well when it zooms in real close to the characters.
When you start Act 2 and it's in a close-up shot of Lula with the folder on her desk, it took me like a few seconds to like piece together what I was supposed to be looking at.
Yeah.
It's very weird.
But yeah, I just wanted to mention the visuals.
Yeah, that's a good call out.
Yeah.
Because we didn't really say very much.
It was either going to come up at the beginning or the end. I just knew it.
Yep. If you have final thoughts, press 1.
Woo. Yeah, hello. I've got final thoughts.
You're on the air.
So, as we mentioned early on, we played the first act of this like 5 or so years ago, and I really loved the first act. And waiting this long, I think, kind of like impacted my expectations in like the way the final product landed for me. So there was like a little bit of disappointment that it didn't quite follow through on a lot of the like stuff set up in the first act. This game is still great. It's not going to be to everyone's tastes, but like I feel like this is already a hidden gem. I doubt this is going to get a lot of attention or anything. If you like adventure games, especially like more modern indie ones, like this one hits it out of the park, I think. And if you appreciate like experimental stuff, like there's a lot of interesting stuff going on in this game. Memorable set pieces, like likable characters. You know, it didn't quite land on the level that I maybe hoped it would, but I still like this game a lot.
Yeah. Briefly on the note of this getting a lot of attention, I think that the weirdness of its development cycle, in addition to the weirdness of just the game as it is, certain channels have picked it up. I've talked to several people about this game as I've been playing it, and I want to say the majority of people who aren't as like, who don't search this kind of stuff out, aren't really aware of it, or maybe they've heard of it but don't know anything about it. Whereas like most people, the people who listen to our podcast most of the time are probably familiar with it, at least in some way. But I do agree, like this is no matter how hidden the gem is, it's still a gem. I loved this game. This is a very unusual comparison, but it gives me a feeling outside of the game itself, like Death Stranding did, where if I were to point to somebody and say, I want to recommend this game, I would have to think really hard before I followed through with it. This is a game that I would recommend to like anybody, but like I don't know how many people are actually going to connect with it. I would be remiss if I just talked about Ghost Trick and mentioned that Ghost Trick was a little bit wordy and didn't say that this game is entirely text-based.
It was a little mentally taxing at times.
Yeah.
To play a bunch of this.
There are very few voice actors in this game. When they're there, they're really good. They usually take very small roles, but it's interesting. And because it is holistically text-based, I think that makes me kind of like, it just feels like a different experience than playing a regular game.
Mm-hmm.
So if that's what you're looking for, if you're looking for a game that you have input in, but mostly it's going to tell you a story, and the story's not going to be very clear, and it's kind of like a David Lynch meets Kurt Vonnegut meets Godspeed You! Black Emperor album, and you mashed all of that shit together somehow, then you end up with something resembling what Kentucky Route Zero wants to be.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that counts as a takeaway, but enjoy it. Thank you for listening to No Clip this week.
What are we talking about next time?
Next time, we're going to be talking about The Last of Us Part 2. It came out recently, and we were like, all right.
We did the first one.
Let's talk about that.
Maybe we'll get JJ back. We haven't asked him yet.
There's your peek behind the curtain this episode. We literally have not texted to JJ about this.
Dude, we fly by the seat of our pants, all right?
Hell yeah. So, we have such strong pants.
We do.
That's something JJ would say.
Very pumped. Pumped me hard.
Until that time, you can get a hold of us on our website at noclippodcast.com or on splattershot.pro. There you can find our email if you need to just let us know, hey, good work, dudes. Our YouTube, link to the Discord, all of our old episodes, as well as where you can subscribe to us on iTunes and Google Play if that isn't where you're listening to this right now. Leave us a comment. Check out some episodes about... We mention the cat lady every time that the word adventure is said on a podcast.
Broken Age.
Yeah, jump back to Broken Age. That's not a bad episode.
Harvester.
Also,
is that all the point and clicks we've done?
Pretty much, yeah. I've done some like weird stuff, like Deracine, kind of like
the detention.
Detention, yeah, also point and click.
Hello?
Thank you for calling the Bureau of Cool Podcasts for the No Clip podcast. Press the like button.
Woo.
All right,
all I wanted was a Pepsi. Just one Pepsi, and I had it with lunch.
It was good.
Yeah, it was pretty good. It's a choice of a new generation.
This Pepsi advertisement brought to you by Suicidal Tendencies.